from the stage of the New York State Theater. Now again, let's go backstage to our host Hugh Downs with the General Director of the New York City Opera, Christopher Keene.
What a gem of an opera.
One of the very greatest.
Isn't it great? Yeah, in fact, it's been called the perfect opera. How can it, and it would be hard to find any imperfection in it, but in view of the existence of Don Giovanni and Magic Flute and things like that, why is this one called the perfect opera?
Well, fortunately, we don't have to choose between such masterpieces as Don Giovanni and the Magic Flute and the Marriage of Figaro, but I think it's fair to say that this is the most human of the great Mozart operas. Both Giovanni and Magic Flute depend upon supernatural agencies, the statue that takes Don Giovanni to hell at the end, and the Queen of the Night and Sarastro and the Masonic rituals in Magic Flute. In Figaro, it's just human beings dealing with very human problems with which all of us are familiar.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the piece has had always such universal appeal.
And it manages, this is a weird word, but a profundity that's there along with the real funny comedic aspects of it, too.
Oh, absolutely. I think it goes to the heart of the human dilemma. It's the search for love. It deals with jealousy, with insecurity, with the fear of aging, with the effect of the passage of time on human relationships. There isn't a single emotion witnessed in this opera that everyone hasn't experienced in their own life.
Or almost not a single issue when you think of the relationship between a hierarchy of almost a caste system of nobility and people of a lower class and women's rights, and everything seems to be bound up in it.
Yes, naturally the class system is less of an issue than it was when the piece was written in 1786, when it was so inflammatory that the emperor almost denied Mozart permission to set it to music. And in fact, the more defiant numbers were repeatedly encored in Prague, and the emperor forbade any encores of the numbers that showed the servants reveling in triumph over their masters. But beyond that, the dealing with sexual harassment, for example, is still a subject that's very much in the news today. So the piece is tremendously contemporary, despite the passage of 205 years since its composition.
Did Mozart regard it as maybe his best, or is there any evidence of that?
You know, he was so busy, and he was so interested in his future projects that I think he was very uninterested in ranking his works. In fact, when he came to write the catalog of his works down, he often couldn't remember the name or the keys or the order in which he'd written them.
I can understand that, because he wrote so much in the short life that he had that he probably just didn't keep track of.
Oh, it's simply astonishing. There's no way for us to understand how one human being could have not only written so much, but accomplished so much. You must remember that the creation of those 626 works took place against a background of constant travel, concerts, appearances at court, rehearsals of pieces. No way to comprehend that without airplanes or telephones or fax machines.
Yeah, without any. It is astonishing. If, from a standpoint of accessibility, if we were to find some people who had never heard Mozart, would this be the best thing to send them to acquaint them?
Well, if we were going to send Mozart to a Martian, for example, I probably wouldn't pick one of the operas simply because the words and the subject matter are so specific. I would pick one of the great piano concertos or one of the great final symphonies,
or a symphony,
which show Mozart at his most abstract, and yet his musical language had developed to a point that has scarcely been reached or certainly never surpassed.
With all of the human elements in this and the at that time revolutionary flavor of it, is this a message opera in the sense that there were message movies?
Well, there were very different messages conveyed at very different levels. Beaumarchais was saying to the aristocracy, your time is coming, and the middle class and the lower class are going to change the social system. That was very clearly the message. Mozart was much less interested in the political message and far more interested in the human relationships, the fact that people have to learn to trust each other, that love can't be compelled, that relationships take work, and the moment at the end when the Countess finally decides that she loves her husband enough to forgive him after she's really caught him in a very compromising position, was Mozart's own plea for compassion between human beings, that the only way life can work out is if we're willing to forgive each other and start over again time after time after time.
And he needed some compassion at points in his life.
He needed himself. He had difficulties in his own life with his relationships with his parents and with his wife and with the world around him. And it's a deeply compassionate piece.
These meanings apparently don't change over time, do they?
No, they don't change at all. That's what makes this piece universal.
Is there a different, I suppose different productions of it could stress different aspects. Would you ever support a reinterpretation of it that might put the heavy emphasis on, say, women's rights or something like that?
Well, I think it's very important to find what in any work speaks particularly to today. We had, for instance, this season a very controversial production of La Traviata, which set it in today, in 1991. And this caused a great deal of excitement, some pro and some con. But I think that a great masterpiece can survive lots of interpretations as long as you don't injure the music and as long as you don't violate the actual letter of the text.
Right. Restaging it with different costuming and everything would probably be not to the point, because it was also adequately expressed in the time that he did it with the people's positions and so forth, that I suppose it's best to leave that alone.
Well, of course, in Europe you see productions of Figaro where people wear costumes turned inside out, or where they're in modern dress, or where it takes place on the moon. We're very pleased with this production, and it seems to express the essence of what the opera is about in such a way that we hope it lasts for a very long time.
And there's nothing about it that makes it less understandable when you see it.
Clearly with supertitles, that's for sure. People are able to understand what's being said.
That's a big help. That's very, very true. Is there a difference in audience reactions to this music? Considering the fact that audiences at the time this premiered never had heard music written in should I say, a more advanced style, more modern style. Do they react differently, do you think, than the original audience?
Well, it was an enormous hit in Prague when it was first performed in 1786. It was probably the biggest single success Mozart enjoyed in his lifetime. People went out humming the tunes through the streets, so it was the equivalent of having a great Broadway hit today. On the other hand, Mozart's music was considered too complex for the common man at the time. There's a famous exchange when the emperor said to Mozart, after hearing one of his operas, "Too many notes, Mozart," and Mozart said, "Only as many as necessary, Your Majesty." So Mozart was considered a somewhat intellectual and complicated composer. Nevertheless, this piece was a sensational hit and buoyed up his spirits at an otherwise rather difficult time.
Marvelous. Could you just give us a little guidance on the remaining three acts now? We've seen what happened in this first one. A little bit, not necessarily what's going to happen, but what directions is this going to take us, and how much complexity is going to increase as it goes on?
Well, Mozart had a unique ability to change just as life changes, from a moment of great happiness to a moment of melancholy, to a moment of tragedy, to a moment of triumph. And so this opera, which up until now has been funny and amusing and lighthearted and gay, suddenly turns very sad in the second act when we meet the one figure that's been talked about by everybody but not seen, the Countess herself, a lady who's dealing with not the disintegration but with the fading of a very deep and true love, her love for her husband. She's losing his attention and she's deeply aware of it. And what has been a comedy suddenly takes on a very human and very poignant sense, and it's heard from the very opening chords. Mozart shifts key, which was always a very meaningful way for Mozart to indicate a change of emotion, a change of feeling.
Now, I'm going to get a chance to talk to you a little more in the last intermission, so I'll save the question about the rest of the opera for that.
Great.
But I want to thank you in the meantime, and we're going to meet some of the singers and everything.
Terrific, and enjoy the rest of the opera.
I sure will. Thank you very much.
This is live from Lincoln Center, now in the first intermission of this New York City Opera performance of The Marriage of Figaro. We'll return to Hugh Downs backstage for a conversation with Maureen O'Flynn and Dean Peterson, our Susanna and Figaro this evening, right after this short pause.
Live from Lincoln Center is underwritten by General Motors, and it's Chevrolet, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Buick, Cadillac, GMC Truck Divisions, and GMAC. General Motors, committed to excellence. Live from Lincoln Center is also made possible by grants from the Robert Wood Johnson Jr. Charitable Trust and the National Endowment for the Arts.
From the moment I saw you again, I wanted you. I have never loved anyone else.
Please, Johnny. Just to be discovered together with me in disgrace.
Their fiery passion ignited pre-war Singapore.
Be assured that if you touch her again, I'll kill you.
Tanamera, the saga of forbidden love, treachery, and betrayal. Premiering Saturday, October 5th at 9 on KCTS.
What's going on in Seattle's housing market? Should you buy, sell, or refinance? Also, find out what's up and what's down in the stock market. And things heat up as Inside explores a controversial practice of the Ku Klux Klan and the constitutional fight over this issue. Don't miss the fall season premieres Friday, October 4th.
Inspector Adam Dalglish tries to get away for a vacation only to become entangled in a series of gruesome murders. Devices and Desires on Mystery. Thursday, October 3rd at 9.
And now, as promised, we go backstage once again to our host, Hugh Downs, with our Susanna of the evening, Maureen O'Flynn, and our Figaro, Dean Peterson.
Maureen and Dean, I look forward to talking with you too. I suppose one of the things I might start by asking you, since you have arias in the beginning part of the opera that are very meaningful, your famous aria really comes miles away from here.
In the fourth act.
Which is the more enviable position? Would you to warm up to it, or to come on strong at the beginning?
I kind of envy him myself. I mean, it's a long night, so doing that aria in the last act is different when it starts past 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, I don't know. You don't get vocally tired, I don't think, or if you do, nobody knows it. But is that something that you'd have to think about?
Well, with this role, I might take a little bit more care of myself during the day. I might take a nap or something.
Yeah.
But once it starts, it flows so easily that I don't even think about it once I get there. It's still part of the action.
Yeah, that's
Everybody forgets I sang in the first act. So. It's so long a night, you know. Everybody stays to hear you, you know. So,
well, while we're on this subject, in many people, I suppose that might be considered normal to have your voice a little bit different in the morning than it is later in the day and late in the evening. In singing, is that true as a rule, or does your voice stay pretty much the same for you?
I sing in my speaking voice mostly. I mean, my range is kind of in that speaking voice range, so I don't have to worry too much. So, you know, on days of performances, I don't talk too much, and you know, I don't go lift weights or anything. But but I don't have to. You know, I don't take any special precautions. I think it's probably different for.
Well, let's put it this way. 10 years ago, I sang in the morning the way I sing at night. Now that's not so true. I have to warm up.
It probably is.
I have to warm up. But if I keep quiet all day, then there's no problem.
This group works well in ensemble. That's been a thing that's been remarked many times. Scott Bergeson said they like each other, as though maybe with mild surprise in his voice, because leads me to ask, where are the famous rivalries, the temperamental
Not here.
prima donnas?
None here.
We're all good friends, I think.
We're definitely an ensemble cast. We're like-minded, dramatically and musically and emotionally. We have a great time out there. It's a great joy to work with each other.
I wonder if that represents some kind of forward step in the whole business of presenting productions of this kind. The operatic past is replete with incidents like Caruso, I understand, bit a leading lady on the ear one time in the production of Carmen, and they were furious at each other, and that just doesn't happen here at all. You don't.
I haven't experienced
Not so
it.
far, yeah. No.
The show's not over yet, but I haven't.
Well, I think this opera has something to do with it, too. It's an opera about, you know, life and forgiveness and acceptance and love. Those are things that we all do today.
You think the nature of this opera makes things a little easier for everybody to get along and like
It's hard to be in a bad mood in this opera.
Yeah.
It's a delight from beginning to end.
And then we get people like Bill and Elizabeth and Jonathan and Peter and and Maureen.
And Dean.
Do you think audiences sense that you guys get along well?
Sure.
Oh yeah, I think so. I think that definitely translates across the
And it does come across, right?
Oh yeah.
I think so.
Sure.
We do get along, and I think it's so important at the beginning of this opera that everybody sees that Figaro and Susanna are really in love, and there's no separation between them. What one thinks, the other one feels, and what one feels, the other one thinks, and so Maureen and I are like-minded, I think, in our treatment of these roles, and so it works good.
Speaking of the roles, it could be said that Brunhilde in the Last of the Ring operas had a louder role, but none is longer. None is longer than Susanna.
Nothing's longer, no. For a time on stage,
all the
definitely
time.
this is the longest role in the soprano repertoire.
This is a corny question, but I think there are people who would like to know, how long did it take you from scratch to learn this, to have it ready to go?
I learned it first in English, and it was one of those quickie jobs that I got all of a sudden. So I learned it in 4 days. You know, ignorance is bliss. But then when I had to relearn it in Italian, I didn't take as much time as I should have because I thought it would be an easy role to learn, having done it in English. There's a lot of words. A lot of words.
Not too many notes, as somebody says to Mozart.
A lot of black notes too, yes.
Yeah.
A lot of black notes.
But they're all supposed to be there, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of wasted notes.
I've done a bunch of performances as